Hi, this is Tom on board Thalia, and we are tied up at the Brewerton Boatyard in Brewerton, New York. Just came across Lake Oneida today. Pretty nice run. It was kind of nice to be outside of the canal for a while and into a pretty large lake. But that's not what I want to talk to you about. I was going to go through a couple tips and tricks to going through the locks. We've had 4 days now of going through locks. So we're not an expert, but we do have a lot of ideas. We've been through 22 locks so far, so most of them have been up-locking, but we had 2 locks today that we went down-locking in. So anyways, I'll give you some tips and tricks. The first one I would say is safety. Make sure you wear a life jacket. You'll see most people wearing life jackets, and all the lock tenders have life jackets on. They do have ladders in the lock chambers if you fall overboard, but the water's pretty nasty looking, so you don't want to take that chance. The second thing is to be aware that it's physically demanding. We were kind of surprised by this, so be ready. Make sure that you're physically capable of handling lines, pulling with some amount of load on the line. The bigger your boat, the more physical it's going to be. We came through with 2 people, just Karen and I. Probably would have been helpful to have one other person. We looked enviably to another boat that had a bunch of kind of teenager or college age kids on board with maybe mom and dad at the helm, and we really wanted to grab one of the kids off the boat to help us. So, but anyways, it's physically demanding, so if you're older and you're not sure if you're strong enough, make sure you have people on board that can help. Like a bigger boat like ours or a heavier boat, it's just all the more difficult and challenging. So again, I would say 2 people are the minimum, more the better. The next thing is have a lot of large fenders. You'd be surprised. We had 2 big fenders that I'd used on the boat years ago for storing it in the water over the winter, and I looked at them in the basement and thought, these things are just too big to take with us. And at the last minute I threw them on board, and I was really happy to have those. Your boat's going to be knocked around a lot in the lock chamber, and you're going to be pushed against the wall. Other boats may come approach you or be not fully in control. So it's good to have some extra fenders. And you also want to have enough fenders to put on both sides of your boat, even though you're going to probably find one side is easier to tie to than another based on how your boat's set up. But you still want to have fenders on the other side. We use the ball-shaped fenders predominantly on our favorable side, which is our starboard side going into the lock. And I found those to work best. They give the most sort of distance between your hull and the wall. We have a couple of cylindrical shaped fenders, those work okay, but they do get compressed a lot, and if you've got something that's that wide and it's long, it's nice to have the length, but it's going to be compressed to maybe half of that width under a lot of load. So if you have a wide ball fender, you have a little bit more of a buffer there. Your fenders are going to be beat up a lot. There are walls that are smooth, that are kind of smooth concrete. Some of them are sort of smooth steel plates, but that's as much as you run into those, you also run into walls that are like corroding, crumbling concrete, and you get the exposed kind of rock aggregate underneath there. We went through a couple locks that were really nasty looking, and your fender, if it gets inside some of those cracked up, broken up parts, or even it's almost like a little mini cave thing that your fender can get caught up in. And first off, that means your hull is going to be closer to the wall and get scratched or damaged, and also your fender could get caught in there and damaged or popped or whatever. So watch that as your boat is maneuvering. Try to get the boat in position on the wall that's not away from those nasty parts of the wall. But anyways, have lots of good fenders. You can't get too big of a fenders and too many in that case. On the fender thing, make sure that you attach your fenders at the widest part of the hull. What I mean by that is, like, for a sailboat and most boats, from the deck or the tow rail down, there's usually a little bit of a curve as it comes down to the water line. So if you tie your fenders low to the water, you've got that curve that, again, doesn't give as much distance for the widest part of the boat to the wall. So you want to actually tie your fenders high, right up close to the top of the tow rail. We made adjustments on some of the later locks as we went through. And you obviously want to space them out and have plenty. You'll need a couple right amidships where your boat's probably the widest, but you want some closer to the ends because your boat's going to swing around a bit. However, the only caveat to that is some of the locks, at least when you're uplocking, you'll rise up and the water level is quite close to the top of the deck of the lock. There might be only maybe a foot in some cases of additional concrete wall. In some of the places, actually, the concrete wall kind of curves up a bit away from your boat, so it's like a double whammy as far as your fender's not really helping too much. So you might find that your fenders kind of pop up on top of the deck of the lock wall, and you have nothing between you and the concrete. So the best thing there is just to be aware of that and have boat hooks ready to push yourself off the wall. So on the topic of boat hooks, you definitely want at least 2 boat hooks, and we have 3, and so that's good. And you want at least one of them to be a telescoping type of boat hook. We have this, I can't remember the name of the brand, but it's an aluminum 3-section telescoping thing. It goes out like 18 feet. And I did extend it to the full length in one of the locks because we got blown off of the wall, and the line was like really far away, and I was reaching out with the end of the pole to try to, the very end of the pole length, to try to reach the line, and I got it. So if you have 2 of those telescoping boat hooks, great. Make sure that they're robust boat hooks though, because you're going to be pushing against the wall with the tip of them, and you don't want to super weak. Thank you, Karen. Super weak boat hook, otherwise you're going to break it. I mentioned about so fenders on both sides. Again, you're going to have a sort of a favorable side. For us, based on where our mast was located on the deck, we kind of moved it over to the port side a little bit. That was to make room on the starboard side so we could come on the starboard side to tie to the wall or hold on to the wall. But be prepared. Sometimes you might have to come in on the port side, and it may not be your choice. You may get blown over that side. There may be too many boats in the lock chamber already on the starboard side, so be aware of that. Gloves. So you really want some good gloves, good work gloves. I occasionally use our sailing gloves, but more often we use kind of a heavy-duty kind of gardening glove or leather glove. They're going to get dirty and nasty, so use something that you don't mind, getting dirty and nasty and slimy. But you want it really rugged because you're going to be pushing against the wall with your hands sometimes, and obviously working with your holding on to lines and going up and down with those. Those lines can be slimy, so good work gloves are important there. If you have bow and stern thrusters, lucky you. We don't, but a lot of the power boats that went through did. So if you're a power boater and you have a boat with thrusters, you're going to be in better shape for that. They'll definitely come in handy, but I would just caution you, once you get settled against the wall with your thrusters, to then just try to hold on the lines and not use your thrusters. We had one boat behind us that was constantly, the whole 20 minutes in the lock, was on and off with their bow thruster, and it was just excessive use. And the other challenge with it is if you're on the other side of the wall of the chamber from somebody using their bow thruster, they're sending water washing over to you, so it's kind of a discourteous thing to do to your neighborly boaters. So there's I mentioned there's uplocking and downlocking. We've spent most of our time from the Hudson up to where we are, and on the other end of Lake Oneida here, uplocking, meaning you're going up in elevation. You come into the lock fills with water, you go up X amount of feet, and the gates open and you move around. But the other thing is downlocking, so we've done 2 of those. Generally speaking, uplocking is more difficult because the chamber is being filled with water, and they got these big valves that they open up. You can hear kind of creaking noises, and the water starts to bubble up, and it adds a lot of turbulence. And your boat's going to shift around. It can go along the wall and back on the wall. It can drift away from the wall. It's like a sort of carbonated water, if you will. So you have to hold on tighter with the lines because of that turbulence. The 2 locks we went down locking today, I mean, it was a breeze. You're holding on, and the boat's just gently, slowly kind of lowering down, and you can hold the position really well. So just be aware of that. There are from what we've seen, sort of 3 ways that they provide you to hold on to the wall. The first one is weighted lines. That just means like a heavy-duty nylon line with a lead weight or something on the bottom of it. And when you come into the lock, there'll be these lines hanging down on both sides of the walls. And again, we tied starboard too, so we'd go down the wall, and we'd try to slow down, and we'd each grab onto a line, me more towards the stern and Karen up by the bow. So that's one option, and you usually snag them with your boat hook, or if you're close enough, you can actually reach out and grab them. The second one is cables. So they'll have these grooves in the wall, and I'll try to include some pictures of this so you can see what it is, but they'll have these indentations in the wall going all the way up from the water level to the top, and they'll have a heavy-duty steel cable, or I don't know what kind of cable it is. It's coated, so it's smooth, and it's secured at the top and the bottom. And the idea is you put a line around that, like a dock line, and you hold both ends of the line, and you kind of hold the boat as the boat rises up, or if you're going down, lock and hold it as you go down. But it's a great way to solidly hold on to the wall. The problem with the weighted lines is they're attached to the top, but they're not attached to the bottom. So if you're in a lock that's 20 or 30 feet high of a lift, you're holding on to this thing that's 30 feet, 35 feet up in there. It's secured up there, but not down where you are, and your boat can move around. It's really hard to get a lot of leverage. So those cables are great. The best option is pipes. If you see those along the lock wall, you definitely want to position your boat to grab one. It'll be a lot more stable, and it's a lot easier to handle. So that's the thing. Again, weighted lines, cables, or drop pipes. If you're not sure what's coming up in the next lock, which is the case for a lot of times, we try to read up about what's available. What should we expect? Are we going to have weighted lines? Are we going to have the fortunate thing of cables or pipes? We use Active Captain a lot, so you can look up in Active Captain on that log and see if somebody else has written up about what's available. You'll also see comments about what the condition of the wall is. Is it smooth and easy wall, or is it a crumbling, nasty, fender-busting wall? So Active Captain's a good source for that. They also will give you information about the height of the lift of the lock, which is all good information to know about. If you're fortunate to have pipes or cables, you want to wrap a line around that at midships, but just don't. You can cleat one end off, but you definitely don't want to cleat both ends off. And whatever you have that you're handling, you don't want to cleat anything to your boat. You're going to be going up or down, as the case may be, and so you don't want things permanently attached to your boat. In a pinch, if you see a ladder, there's always going to be at least one ladder somewhere along the wall. You can use that. They're pretty strong, so you can use that to wrap a line around. Obvious problem there is that it's attached to the wall in places, and it's got rungs going up, so you don't have a smooth pipe going all the way up continuously. But we did have to use that one time in a pinch. It came in really handy, but it's just you have to be much more active. You're taking the line, wrapping it around a rung of the ladder, and as you go up a couple feet, you got to kind of quickly slip it off that rung and slip it onto the next rung above and hold on to that. But it's definitely, I would prefer that than not having anything else. Like if you just had weighted lines, the ladder would be a better option than that. So that's that. When the water is up at the top part of the lock, as you rise up to the top, you're going to find that, like for instance, if you have weighted lines that you're holding on to, depending upon how high the water is going to go, you're going to be kind of at the top part of holding that line. So you want to have your boat hook handy, and I'll show pictures of this too, but it's helpful to kind of hook the top part of the line. The line's usually tied around a ring, and you can kind of catch it with the hook of your boat hook. So you have the boat hook in one hand and the line in another, and you're hooking and lining it together, and that's helpful. Gives you a little bit more firm hold on the line, and especially if you're in a power boat and you're up higher than how we are off the water in the sailboat, you're going to be kind of reaching down, and sometimes kind of odd angles. So kind of having a boat hook to reach down and grab that ring is good, and you can, especially the telescoping boat hook, you can adjust the distance away and still hold on firmly to it. But again, if you're in a power boat, be prepared to be reaching down when you're at the top of the lift. On the topic of power boats, we saw quite a few power boats that were using walkie-talkie so they had a headset, a little mic, and they were talking back and forth, sort of husband and wife crew kind of thing, and that seemed really helpful. Obviously, we don't have them, so we need to get a first-hand experience with it. But I would think on a power boat it would be very helpful when you have more obstructions and you can't clearly see or hear the other person. You might have somebody up at the bridge and somebody down below at the stern, and you can't even see them, let alone probably hear them very well. So consider that. It would even be helpful on a sailboat, but we're kind of horizontally across from each other, and we can see each other. But still, there's times when you've got to really talk loud, and communication is a definite thing you want to work on there. So again, consider the walkie-talkie thing. If your boat can accommodate it on those weighted lines, it's a good idea to, if you can, the way your boat's set up is to run. I saw people run the line down through a cleat, and not cleating it off, but kind of wrapping it around the horn of the cleat or through a chalk, and kind of, taking some of the pull of the line off of their hand by doing that. And that was helpful. We're not really set up for that. There's too much stuff in the way. But I saw a lot of power boats do that, so that's an option. Talked about that. So if you're, consider waiting before you go into a lock chamber if there's a whole bunch of boats around. It's the kind of thing where the more is not the merrier. We were in one lock where we had 6 other power boats in there with us, and it was nerve-wracking. You're already nervous trying to get the boat in and get securely holding onto the wall somehow. And if you got other boats around and they're all doing things and they're moving around and some of them are kind of drifting close to you, it's a lot more to think about. And one of the people we met early on in the Erie Canal said, if you can go through the lock by yourself, it's really a lot better for you. And I totally agree with that. So consider that. It may be worth your while if you've got a whole bunch of other boats around you to let them through. And the lock masters don't really care. They'll lower the water again and let you in again. So going through the lock by yourself is definitely a lot less stressful. But if you are part of the group going in, it's sort of the proper etiquette or protocol to go all the way, if you're in the front, to go all the way down the wall to the very end or close to the end, so that you get more room behind you for people to come in. So consider that. Let's see, we talked about that. Diesel exhaust. So if you have time, and we did this most of the time, but not always, once you get settled on the wall, have somebody go and shut the engine off. You're going to be sitting in a lock chamber for 20 minutes, and your diesel engine is going to be generating lots of exhaust. You're down inside of a chamber that's 30, 40 feet deep, and it gets to smell pretty bad. So it's a lot more pleasant to shut that thing off and just wait till you get to the top of the wall before you start it up again. Radios and VHF, so you're, at least in the Erie Canal, all the lockmasters are monitoring channel 13, so you call them at 13, and we always would call them before we get maybe a mile away, or if we could see the lock ahead of us, we'd call them and say, and the way you would generally refer to it is, like we were we've been westbound the whole time, so I call up and I say, lock 23, this is the westbound vessel Thalia, I'm a mile away, 10 minutes away. They always want to know which direction you're going in, westbound or eastbound, because that then obviously determines for them whether they have to flush the lock or just open the gate and let you through. So again, simple communication. You call the lock by their lock number, lock 23, westbound vessel Thalia. Be prepared for them not to respond. Early on, we had quite a few of the lock tenders respond, but then for a while there was a section where nobody would respond, so that was kind of odd. But if the gate is open and the green light is on, so those two things, they'll turn the light on for you when it's clear for you and safe for you to proceed into the chamber. So look for that green light. You can also try to reach them by cell phone. So they all have phones. Again, they may not always answer them. They may not be have them handy. We did that. We called ahead a couple blocks ahead of us just to make sure they were still open and operating. So you can look at their phone numbers on the New York State Canal website. And when you go through, they're going to ask you for some sort of registration number or U.S. Coast Guard documentation number. So have that handy already. Be aware of the wind as you approach the lock, and also be prepared for a change in direction. And sometimes you get inside the lock chamber and the wind's kind of swirling around. The kind of worst case scenario for us is when the wind was behind us as we were motoring in, because you want to have a lot of control about when you slow the boat down, and when the wind's pushing you further through, it's kind of a hassle. And we had some cases where the wind started to blow us off the wall while we really hadn't had secured our hands on the lines yet. So, it's just something to be aware of. And if it's really windy, I would consider not locking through, because maybe wait till the wind dies down. And the other thing kind of related to that is be aware of the currents, sort of side currents and eddies as you're approaching the lock. We ran into this a lot when there was a lock right next to a dam. So you're approaching the lock and there's a dam right next to you, and it's spilling off water, and the water's bubbling all around, even though that water's flowing down the river, and so you can be going against the current most of the time, as you get close to the lock, you get this little eddies going on that can kind of actually be pushing current for you into the lock, which again affects your ability to control the boat. So again, something to be aware of. As you line yourself up as you're going in, kind of keep an eye on your relationship to the lock, and you might be pushed sideways, or you can look along the side of the shore to see if there's water flow into the lock or out, so you can be prepared and know how to react. So I'm going to switch gears here for a second and show you some examples of what I've been talking about. This is at Lock 2. You can see them flushing out the water in the chamber, and it causes a lot of turbulence at the lower gate there, as you notice. So you just have to sort of wait it out. And this is an example of some of the cruddy walls that you'll run into. This is, I think, a Lock 11, and you can see gouges in the wall there. Another angle of it there too, so you just want to make sure you watch out for your fenders on these ones. And here's Karen using a pipe, so you can see that pretty sturdy pipe and running a line around it and back to herself to hold on. Very, very stable way to do it. And at the top, she's using a boat hook and the line to hold on to that top ring, as I mentioned. And here's one of the locks we went through with 7 boats. It was just ridiculously crowded, so if you can avoid this at all, do it. This is a guard gate. It's not a lock per se, but it's just a gate that closes down that section of the canal. You can see them lowering it behind us. They use that to control the water levels in the canal and to do maintenance. Here's an example of some of the debris that's piled up on a upriver current side of a bridge. Example of a barge coming down. This was 2 barges lashed together, about 500 feet total in length, so you have to be aware of this. You won't see too many of them. Hey there, this is Tom, and aboard Thalia, and I'm here with my co-captain, Karen. Yeah. So this is rush hour traffic in the boating life. We're waiting to enter into Lock 17 on the Erie Canal. We're westbound. Lock 17 is kind of notorious because it's the largest lift lock in the system. Apparently the largest in the United States. There's one similar to it in Canada. But it rises us 40 feet, 41 feet or so. It's got this very interesting guillotine gate that drops down behind you. Normally they have like two swing gates that come together. But we're kind of bored here because we're waiting to get through, and I threw away a job commuting to work with lots of traffic for yet more traffic. So you can see there are two boats ahead of us and a boat behind us with a distinct Canadian accent. So the boat ahead of us, the one in the very front, is called Joella. We've been kind of hopscotching with them the last couple days. They kind of head up before us, they stop before us, we go past them, and then they pass us. This lock is a little special also because we are required to tie port side 2, left side of the boat, to the wall. Normally you can tie whatever side you want, but this one we're going to tie to the port side that's as directed by the lockmaster. We understand it's because of the height of the lift. When they fill the chamber with water, there's a lot more turbulence than a normal lock because it's 40 feet high of water coming in there. So there's a lot of push from the north side to the south side, so we're required to stay on the south side so we don't drift away from the wall. And so anyway, there's not as much capacity here. There were 4 power boats ahead, or there's, in the last lock there was like, we were the 7th. Yeah, six power boats and we were the 7th, so 7 boats in one lock. It was very crowded. This one takes a little longer because they only can really handle people on the one side. So there's 4 boats in there now. Once they're done going through, there's an eastbound boat that's going to come into the lock. They'll lower them down and let them out, and then we'll be able to enter in. So we'll see, it should be interesting. The town of Little Falls, New York is just on the other side, so that's our destination for tonight. And it's supposed to be a kind of a nice charming little place to stop at. So we're having a good time, and other than the big commuter traffic. So this is what it's like. If anybody thinks it's luxurious and relaxing on a sailboat, it's not. It's just total traffic jam. We'll talk to you later. That's all. I know I talked for a while, but we had a lot of things to think about when we went through, and it was a great experience. I caution you not to worry too much about a lot of the stuff. I mean, it's a lot of fun to go through the locks. It's a great thing to be kind of part of the history of early America and the commerce around the Erie Canal. It's really, really cool to see these working lock systems that are generally there for pleasure boaters. There's a couple of commercial tugs you can see going through, but not often. But it's a great experience, so don't be alarmed by a lot of stuff I say, but it's just more of a kind of a cautionary thing. And hopefully it's been helpful. So I'd love to hear your comments. You can comment on the blog. If this was helpful, I'll do more of them. If you have comments or questions, I'll try to answer those. And we'll talk to you soon. Bye.